Hello and welcome back to Sci-fi Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep the lights on and our amazing staff paid. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or clicking the link in the description and pinned comment below, so we can keep bringing you the best science fiction adventures. Out here in the deep freeze of the asteroid belt, silence was the only companion that never lied. Arthur Bailey preferred it exactly that way. She was an independent salvage engineer, which was just a polite, corporate-approved term for a sky scavenger who picked the rotting bones of dead ships and floating metallic debris. Her hands were permanently stained with engine grease, toxic lubricants, and stardust. Her skin was heavily calloused from years of gripping heavy hydrospanners in the unforgiving void of zero gravity. The megacorporations back on Earth owned absolutely everything: the breathable oxygen, the safe shipping lanes, the water filtration systems, and even the very light from the sun. But out here, hidden in the freezing, chaotic shadows of tumbling space rocks, Arthur was truly free. She lived a solitary, intensely hardened life, fueled by a quiet, burning resentment for the monopolies that strangled humanity from their pristine, towering glass citadels. She survived on scraps and sheer spite, on a Tuesday that felt exactly like a Monday. Her rusty, outdated sensor array pinged a faint, wildly erratic anomaly buried deep inside the belly of a massive ice comet. It was an insanely risky dive. The ice was structurally unstable, highly prone to fracturing into lethal, ship-piercing shards at the slightest thermal shift. But Arthur was desperate to meet her basic fuel quota for the month. Strapped into her worn, patched-up environmental suit, she cut deep into the frozen core using a sputtering plasma torch, constantly fighting the bitter, seeping cold, and the creeping psychological dread of being crushed alive under millions of tons of ice. What she ultimately found was not a rich vein of precious heavy metals or a lost, highly classified military satellite. It was a geometric polyhedral object, roughly the size of a human heart, pulsating steadily with a faint, sickeningly violet luminescence. Its physical structure made absolutely no logical sense. The sharp angles seemed to physically shift and warp whenever she blinked, bending the ambient light around it in ways that made her stomach violently churn. It was freezing cold to the touch, yet humming with a terrifying, seemingly limitless internal energy. The Earth authorities would have gladly paid a massive fortune for it, a bounty large enough to buy her a permanent, luxurious ticket back to the warm blue skies and clean air of her homeworld. But handing over such a profound anomaly to the very people who kept the working class in perpetual chains was entirely out of the question. Her innate curiosity, a highly dangerous trait for a lowly scavenger, took total and absolute control. She carefully wrapped the pulsing alien core in a lead-lined thermal blanket, expertly smuggled it past the heavily armed corporate patrol drones, and hauled it back to her secret chop shop, hidden securely in the hollowed-out belly of a dead, forgotten mining station. For several long weeks, the rest of the universe completely ceased to exist. Arthur isolated herself in her dimly lit, freezing garage, surrounded by floating hydro wrenches, tangled copper wires, and half-finished mugs of bitter synthetic coffee. She boldly cannibalized the massive main thruster manifold from a derelict industrial garbage hauler, a giant, hulking beast of a machine that had been decommissioned and stripped 50 years ago. Piece by agonizing piece, wire by sparking wire, she fused the totally unknown alien core with the archaic, heavy-duty human technology. She had no official blueprints, no advanced mathematical models, only pure mechanical intuition and the stubborn, unbreakable grit of someone who absolutely refused to fail. When she finally welded the very last plasma conduit directly to the polyhedral core, the entire mining station violently shuddered. Years of accumulated dust violently shook from the steel rafters. Heavy iron tools floated upward, completely defying the artificial gravity plating beneath her heavy magnetic boots. Arthur watched in breathless, paralyzed awe as the core generated a localized distortion field. She had not just built a highly efficient engine. She had accidentally created a terrifying device capable of manipulating the fundamental fabric of gravity itself. Every survival instinct she possessed told her to immediately shut it down. Pure logic told her to run away and never look back. But the desperate sky scavenger, deep inside her soul, saw the ultimate, unattainable prize: absolute, unrestricted freedom from the entire solar system. She spent the next 3 grueling days retrofitting the patched-up monstrosity into the cramped, oil-stained engine room of her rickety ship. A tiny vessel held together mostly by industrial duct tape, sheer human willpower, and highly illegal structural modifications. She named it the Rust Bucket, and it was about to change the destiny of the entire galaxy. Arthur strapped herself tightly into the worn leather pilot seat, her greasy hands visibly trembling as she firmly grabbed the primary throttle lever. "Let us see what you can really do," she whispered softly to the empty, dimly lit cockpit. She pushed the heavy throttle all the way forward. The reaction was instantaneous and violently beautiful. There was absolutely no slow, creeping buildup of velocity, no roaring chemical thrusters burning precious liquid fuel. Space itself simply folded completely around the tiny ship. The outdated inertial dampeners screamed in metallic agony as the rust bucket shot forward, instantly and violently shattering the speed of light barrier. The familiar stars directly outside her cracked viewport stretched and turned into long, blinding streaks of pure white energy. But the true, horrifying revelation came just seconds later, as her fragile ship blindly tore through the dark, icy outer edges of the Oort cloud. Something mathematically impossible happened. The small vessel violently collided with a colossal, completely invisible energy barrier that had quietly enveloped the entire solar system since the very dawn of human time. A perfect, inescapable prison wall, specifically meant to keep humanity trapped inside. The makeshift, alien-powered engine did not just slip safely through it. It ripped a gaping, catastrophic hole straight through the very fabric of the ancient containment field, sounding a silent, terrifying alarm that would instantly echo right across the deepest, darkest corners of the galaxy. Light years away from the solitary struggle of the human scavenger, the Epoch observation station floated in the absolute silence of deep space. It was a flawless, geometric monolith of cold white metal, representing the absolute pinnacle of bureaucratic perfection mandated by the Galaxy Council. Inside its sterile, perfectly illuminated halls, millions of alien analysts from 100 different subjugated species worked in terrifying unison. Their sole, eternal purpose was monitoring Sector 749, a seemingly insignificant, isolated pocket of the galaxy containing a single yellow star and a watery blue planet. For thousands of years, the duty had been agonizingly dull. The overseers watched the primitive bipedal inhabitants of that blue dirt ball slowly invent fire, slaughter each other over imaginary borders, and eventually launch clumsy, primitive chemical rockets into their immediate orbit. It was a pathetic, predictable comedy of a lesser species. The observers sat in their perfectly calibrated hovering chairs, casually logging the mundane evolutionary milestones of a race completely oblivious to the grand cosmic order. Then, the silence of the monitoring Grand Hall was violently shattered. It was not a standard yellow alert indicating a minor unauthorized satellite launch, nor a red alert signaling a primitive nuclear detonation. The enormous, curved display screens dominating the circular room instantly plunged into an absolute, suffocating darkness. A sound akin to a dying star collapsing in on itself echoed through the sterile corridors. It was a level, black containment breach, the highest echelon of alarm, one that had not been triggered in over 10 million standard galactic cycles. High Overseer Vale, a tall, slender being with pale, translucent skin and perfectly symmetrical facial features, stood up so quickly his hovering podium violently destabilized. His large, pitch-black eyes widened in genuine, unfiltered terror as the holographic tactical map of the human solar system flickered violently. "Report the exact nature of this anomaly immediately," Vial demanded, his voice devoid of its usual cold arrogance. Now, trembling with an emotion his species had scientifically bred out of their genetics, eons ago. A subordinate analyst, a creature with multiple limbs frantically typing across dozens of haptic interfaces, responded in a strained, panicked tone. "High Overseer, the perimeter is compromised. The molecular prison has been physically pierced." Vial felt the temperature in his cold blood plummet. The molecular prison was not a defensive shield to keep invaders out. It was a microscopic, unbreakable energy mesh, woven into the very fabric of space and time around the human solar system. It was designed to keep the inhabitants permanently locked inside. "Did they manage to interface with one of our spacegate corridors?" Vial asked, desperately hoping for a simple, punishable act of trespassing. "No, sir," the analyst replied, its voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "The thermal decay signature indicates zero reliance on the established network. They did not use a corridor. The target vessel directly folded multidimensional space. They simply folded the universe to step through the barrier." A deafening, terrified gasp rippled through the grand hall. Multidimensional folding was an absolute taboo, a forbidden technology completely outlawed and eradicated by the Galaxy Council since the dawn of the current epoch. The Council had long portrayed themselves to the lesser civilized worlds as benevolent diplomats and peaceful peacekeepers, graciously guiding the galaxy toward a unified harmony. That was the grand lie. In truth, they were ruthless, tyrannical dictators who crushed any civilization that threatened their absolute hegemony. And no species in the history of the universe had ever posed a greater threat than the ancient ancestors of humanity. Long before the Council established its reign, the humans had been a terrifying empire of chaotic, unyielding conquerors. The Council had barely managed to defeat them, stripping them of their technology, wiping their historical memory, and sealing them within a cosmic cage to slowly devolve into harmless primates. Humanity was not a new, promising neighbor. They were the ancient, slumbering nightmare of the cosmos, and the cage door had just been kicked violently open. There would be no diplomatic envoys dispatched. There would be no standard protocol of assimilation, no cultural exchange, and absolutely no negotiations. Vial immediately bypassed the entire bureaucratic chain of command and opened a direct, encrypted quantum link to the absolute highest tier of the Galaxy Council inner circle. "The ancient cage is broken," Vial stated, staring blankly at the ruined telemetry data. "A human vessel has achieved independent folding capability. The disease has returned." The response from the Council was instantaneous and chillingly decisive. Within exactly 3 standard minutes, a secret, unanimous vote was cast in the dark. The verdict was absolute eradication. The extinction order was officially ratified for the entire human solar system. Deep within the hidden, lightless nebulae of the Council capital, the Dark Fleet awakened. They were enormous, pitch-black dreadnoughts designed for one singular, horrifying purpose: to erase entire planets from existence without leaving a single trace of ash. Operating under complete stealth cloaking, the Armada silently detached from their docking tethers. Their massive, planet-cracking plasma batteries began to prime, glowing with a sinister, sickly green hue. Their absolute directive was simple and merciless. They were to hunt down the solitary ship that broke the barrier, incinerate its pilot, and completely glass the Earth into a molten, lifeless cinder before the blind. Squabbling humans even realized their executioners had arrived. The violent shuddering of the jump abruptly ceased, dumping the vessel out of the multi-dimensional fold with the harsh grace of a collapsing building. The deafening scream of twisting metal was instantly replaced by a crushing, absolute silence that made her eardrums violently throb. Arthur unclenched her bruised, bleeding hands from the flight controls, her chest heaving in rapid, shallow gasps as she desperately tried to process the impossible view beyond the cracked viewport. The familiar tapestry of distant stars and the comforting, endless blackness of standard space were entirely gone. Instead, she was adrift in an ocean of coagulated dark red mist, a thick, suffocating nebula that seemed to physically swallow the meager emergency lights of her ship. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted another 20 degrees, creeping into her bones with an unnatural, predatory chill. There was no celestial north out here, no planetary bodies, no recognizable constellations. There was only an endless crimson purgatory that defied every single law of astrophysics she had ever studied. It felt far less like a region of space and much more like the rotting inside of a dying cosmic organism. As the exterior backup floodlights flickered to life, slicing weak white beams through the bloody fog, the crimson shadows slowly parted to reveal a scale of devastation that completely paralyzed her mind. Floating silently in the bloody haze were the colossal corpses of tens of thousands of dead starships. These were not the blocky, utilitarian corporate freighters of Earth. They were magnificent, alien vessels of unimaginable scale and design. Some, stretching over 40 miles in length, some resembled massive crystalline flowers, shattered into millions of jagged floating petals. Others were sleek, biomechanical leviathans with gaping wounds exposing calcified, metallic ribs and frozen, synthetic veins. Entire armadas from hundreds of unknown civilizations drifted in the silent dark, their hulls scorched black by unimaginably powerful weaponry. It was a cosmic mass grave, a hidden, rotting slaughterhouse suspended entirely outside of conventional reality. The sheer weight of the surrounding death pressed heavily against her mind, a suffocating psychological horror threatening to permanently crack her sanity. She was a scavenger used to picking through the discarded remnants of human industry. But this was the graveyard of the gods, driven by a morbid, terrifying necessity to understand exactly where she was. Arthur maneuvered her crippled vessel toward the nearest floating wreckage, a segmented, golden dreadnought that had been cleanly bisected. She extended a manual data tether, shooting a magnetic harpoon deep into the exposed, dimly glowing nerve center of the alien ship. Her rudimentary onboard computer struggled violently, cooling fans screaming as it tried to process the cascading influx of alien algorithms. After several agonizing minutes, the decryption matrix finally stabilized, and the horrific truth spilled across her main monitor in broken, fractured text. The translated data logs told a story, not of a grand cosmic war, but of systematic, bureaucratic extermination. The Galaxy Council, the supposed benevolent peacekeepers of the universe, harbored a singular, terrifying doctrine. Any species that dared to independently develop faster than light technology, any race that threatened to step out of their assigned, primitive boundaries, was immediately and mercilessly erased from existence. The Council did not share the universe. They sterilized it. They slaughtered entire civilizations and dumped their remains in this red void to maintain their absolute, unquestionable dominance over the stars. Before the sheer magnitude of the cosmic genocide could fully settle in her mind, the dark red void directly outside her window violently tore open. The fabric of the dimension ripped apart like wet paper, vomiting forth a squadron of angular, pitch-black warships. They possessed no running lights, no engine trails, and absolutely no identifying markings. They were shadows cast against the crimson mist, the very executioners who had filled this graveyard for thousands of years. Their advanced targeting sensors, locked onto the tiny human vessel with terrifying speed. There was no warning transmission, no diplomatic hail, no demand for surrender. Soundless, sickly green plasma torpedoes erupted from their invisible launch bays, streaking through the red void with surgical, lethal precision. The first silent impact sheared the entire portside solar array completely off her ship, violently tossing Arthur across the cramped cabin. The second torpedo grazed the aft section, catastrophically compromising her primary life support system. Warning sirens screamed in the rapidly depressurizing cabin as artificial gravity failed and precious. Breathable oxygen vented out into the bloody mist in a thick, white cloud. The internal temperature dropped to lethal levels within 5 seconds. Pushed to the absolute brink of death, Arthur relied on the hardened, feral instincts of a deep space scavenger. She dragged her bruised body into the cramped, actively burning engine bay, using nothing but industrial-grade sealing tape, heavily insulated copper cables, and her own bloody hands. She violently spliced the melting alien core directly into the main emergency battery reserves. She intentionally killed all external power, plunging her ship into total darkness, and desperately used the massive residual magnetic interference radiating from the colossal alien corpses to mask her final energy spike. Praying to a higher power she had never believed in. Arthur slammed her fist down on the manual ignition override, initiating a completely blind, untargeted dimensional jump back through the rift just a fraction of a second before a barrage of green plasma converged on her exact position. The blind dimensional fold violently expelled the crippled vessel directly into the upper exosphere of Earth. Gravity instantly seized the ruined metal chassis, dragging the remains of the ship down at Mach 25. The outer hull instantly ignited, transforming the craft into a screaming, brilliant meteor of burning debris. With the life support systems completely dead and the temperature inside the cabin rapidly approaching combustion levels, Arthur grabbed the pulsing alien core, shoved it deep into her reinforced canvas survival pack, and threw herself into her heavily modified escape pod. It was little more than a retrofitted industrial fuel cylinder, equipped with crude ablative shielding and chemical parachutes. But it was her only chance. The violent deceleration forces threatened to snap her spine as the pod brutally slammed into the dense atmosphere, violently shaking until it finally smashed deep into the muddy soil of a desolate, rain-swept forest. Kicking the heavy hatch open, Arthur dragged her battered body out into the freezing downpour. She did not waste a single second. Reaching into her pack, she extracted a heavily modified, long-range tactical transceiver and immediately hijacked the highest encrypted emergency military frequency she could find. "This is Arthur Bailey. I need to speak to the highest commanding officer immediately. There is a massive, hostile alien armada entering our solar system right now. They possess planet-cracking weaponry, and they are here to eradicate us. You need to mobilize every single defensive platform we have." The radio crackled with heavy static for 3 agonizing seconds before a cold, highly synthesized human voice replied, "Target acquired. Terrorist suspect Arthur Bailey. You are completely surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender immediately. Lethal force is fully authorized." Arthur stared at the radio in absolute shock. The Dark Fleet had beaten her home. While she was blind, jumping through the crimson void, the silent alien armada had already reached the outer edges of the Oort cloud. Their terrifyingly advanced artificial intelligence had effortlessly sliced through every single primitive digital defense grid on Earth within milliseconds. They had manipulated all global radar systems, planted falsified telemetry data, and expertly framed Arthur as a radical corporate extremist who had just detonated an illicit, highly destructive gravity bomb in low orbit. To her own species, she was not the harbinger of a cosmic warning. She was public enemy number 1. The heavy thumping of military assault helicopters instantly echoed through the dense canopy above her. Searing white searchlights began slicing through the heavy rain, hunting for her thermal signature. Arthur sprinted deep into the dense underbrush, her lungs burning with every desperate breath. But the human special forces were not the most dangerous threat in these dark woods. The air behind her suddenly shimmered. A localized distortion in the rain revealed the horrific, insectoid silhouette of a council cyborg assassin. The invisible predators had been silently dropped from orbit to ensure the target was permanently silenced. A razor-sharp, cloaked blade swung violently toward her neck. Relying on pure, feral reflexes, Arthur dropped to the muddy ground, unholstered her heavy plasma welding pistol, and fired a blinding beam directly into the shimmering distortion. The assassin let out a horrific metallic screech as its cloaking mechanism violently short-circuited, revealing a nightmare of dark metal and pale artificial flesh before collapsing into the mud. She had to keep moving. She dragged herself toward a rocky ridge, hiding beneath a heavy stone overhang as heavily armed human strike teams fast-roped from the hovering helicopters nearby. As she huddled in the darkness, clutching the heavy survival pack to her chest, she noticed something impossible. The polyhedral core inside her bag was violently pulsating in a rapid, rhythmic sequence. It was glowing brighter than ever before, vibrating with an intense, humming energy that made her teeth ache. She looked up through the tree line and saw a massive commercial satellite relay tower jutting out of the distant mountainside. The core was actively syncing with the local microwave frequencies. It was absorbing and manipulating the ambient electromagnetic field broadcasted by the tower. The alien device did not just bend the fabric of space. It possessed the profound capability to resonate with and completely hijack any terrestrial energy transmission grid. A terrifying, incredibly reckless plan formed in her desperate mind. She could not run forever. The invisible council hunters would never stop, and her own people would execute her on sight. If she wanted to warn the entire world and expose the massive lie they were living, she needed an amplifier large enough to broadcast across the entire globe simultaneously. She needed to plug the stolen FTL core directly into the largest communication array on the planet. She pulled up her holographic tactical map, her eyes locking onto a heavily fortified red zone located exactly 45 miles south of her current position. The United States Air Force Command Base. It was the absolute nerve center of the global planetary defense network, guarded by thousands of elite soldiers, automated defense turrets, and heavy armor divisions. Infiltrating it was nothing short of guaranteed suicide. But Arthur Bailey was a scavenger who had just stared down the Grim Reaper in a cosmic graveyard. She strapped the glowing core tightly to her back, loaded a fresh thermal battery into her welding pistol, and marched directly into the storm. Cornered animals do not surrender. They bite back. The storm, raging outside the heavily fortified command base, was abruptly swallowed by an unnatural, suffocating darkness that swept across the entire globe. The Dark Fleet abandoned their stealth cloaking protocols entirely. Thousands of colossal, pitch-black warships descended into the lower atmosphere simultaneously. Their massive, angular hulls physically blotting out the sun over every major city on Earth. The sky turned the color of bruised iron. A chilling, synthesized transmission violently hijacked every single digital screen, radio frequency, and military communication channel on the planet. The holographic image of High Overseer Vale materialized before the terrified eyes of over 8 billion humans. His pale, symmetrical face was completely devoid of emotion, a mask of absolute, calculated cruelty. "People of Earth," Vial stated, his voice echoing with terrifying clarity across the globe. "Your planet harbors a cosmic fugitive. The individual known as Arthur Bailey possesses illegal, forbidden technology that threatens the delicate harmony of our galaxy. You have exactly 1 hour to deliver this criminal, alive, along with the complete schematic of her multidimensional folding device. If you fail to comply, or if you attempt to launch a counteroffensive, Your world will be instantly reduced to a lifeless sphere of molten glass. The choice is yours. Absolute panic consumed the global ruling class, the megacorporation executives, the corrupt politicians, and the military generals who had ruthlessly dominated humanity from their pristine glass towers, instantly shattered under the crushing weight of a superior predator. There was no grand debate, no heroic speech about standing together against an alien threat. Driven by pure, pathetic cowardice, the leaders of Earth immediately capitulated. They chose to sacrifice a solitary sky scavenger to save their own luxurious lives. Arthur had successfully breached the central communication hub of the United States Air Force Command Base, barricading herself behind heavy titanium blast doors. But she knew it was only a matter of time. The global mandate came down swiftly. Betray her. The military immediately ceased firing at the alien targets and focused their entire arsenal on the control room. The titanium doors violently buckled inward under the intense heat of heavy breaching charges. Smoke poured into the room as dozens of elite special operations soldiers flooded the command center, their heavy combat boots crunching over shattered glass and ruined consoles. Within seconds, Arthur was completely surrounded. Over 100 high-powered assault rifles were aimed directly at her head. Red laser sights painted her grease-stained face, her chest, and the glowing polyhedral core resting heavily on the main broadcast terminal. A heavily armored human commander stepped forward, his voice shaking slightly despite his aggressive posture. "Arthur Bailey, step away from the terminal. Put your hands exactly where I can see them. The entire planet has surrendered. It is over. Give us the alien device now, or we will execute you where you stand." She was cornered by her own species, the very people she was desperately trying to save. But instead of showing fear, instead of screaming in angry defiance, Arthur simply let out a low, bitter laugh. She looked around the room at the terrified human soldiers, then down at her own bruised, bleeding hands. She smiled, a sad, exhausted expression that carried the weight of 1,000 dead civilizations. "You really think handing me over will save you?" Arthur asked quietly, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the command center. "You think they leave witnesses?" She placed her hand firmly over the glowing core. "Commander, I want you to open a direct, unencrypted visual channel to the alien flagship. Route it through the global broadcast network. Every single person on Earth needs to see this." "You are in no position to make demands, scavenger," the commander barked, raising his weapon. "If you shoot me, my grip slips. This core detonates, and it takes out a 50-mile radius." Arthur lied flawlessly, staring him dead in the eyes. "Open the channel. Let me talk to them. After that, you can hand me over on a silver platter." The commander hesitated, glancing nervously at the humming alien device. With a tight nod, he signaled his communication technicians. The main view screen above them flickered, splitting the feed. On one side was the pale, arrogant face of High Overseer Vale. On the other side was Arthur Bailey, broadcast live to every terrified human being on the planet. "Arthur Bailey," Vale sneered, his voice dripping with absolute contempt. "A primitive scavenger who dared to touch the fire of the gods. You have brought total annihilation upon your world." "I have been out to the red mist," Arthur replied evenly, her voice completely steady. "I saw the graveyard. I saw what you do to the species that learn how to walk on their own." Vale narrowed his pitch-black eyes. "You speak madness, human." "I speak the truth," Arthur fired back, "and I brought the receipts." With a swift, practiced motion, she slammed her data tether into the main global uplink. She did not just broadcast her words. She unleashed the massive, decrypted data cache she had stolen from the slaughtered dreadnought in the dimensional void. Billions of screens across Earth instantly filled with horrific, undeniable evidence. Holographic logs, distress signals from 100 murdered alien races, and the classified extermination orders of the Galaxy Council flashed rapidly before the eyes of the universe. She exposed the grand cosmic lie. The Galaxy Council were not benevolent peacekeepers guiding the stars. They were cosmic butchers, a syndicate of tyrants who slaughtered anyone who threatened their absolute control. And in that singular, breathtaking moment, humanity finally understood exactly why they had been locked in a cage for millions of years. High Overseer Vile's perfectly composed face twisted into a grotesque mask of absolute fury. The grand, cosmic lie, carefully maintained and violently enforced for millions of years, had just been completely dismantled in a matter of seconds by a filthy, grease-stained primate. He completely ignored the pathetic, unconditional surrender offered by the global human leaders. "Eradicate them all!" Vile screamed, slamming his pale fist onto his command console. "Charge the planetary annihilation cannons! I want the entire surface cracked open. Leave absolutely nothing behind but floating ash." Above the Earth, the sickly green glow of the colossal plasma batteries intensified to blinding levels, casting a horrifying neon shadow across the continents. Inside the ruined military control room, the human soldiers dropped their advanced weapons in sheer, paralyzing terror. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for combat fell to their knees, weeping loudly as the main tactical screens displayed an apocalyptic countdown. 60 seconds until total atmospheric ignition. 50 seconds. 40 seconds. The room devolved into a chaotic, deafening chorus of screaming officers, panicked prayers, and blaring warning klaxons. Amidst the absolute panic of the impending apocalypse, Arthur Bailey remained perfectly, terrifyingly still. She did not raise her hands in prayer, and she did not look up at the burning sky. She kept her eyes locked entirely on the heavily modified broadcast terminal. Her bruised, bloody fingers danced rapidly across the cracked glass keyboard. She was not trying to fire a primitive weapon, and she was certainly not trying to fold the Earth away to safety. As a scavenger, she knew that the absolute best way to deal with a massive piece of machinery was to use its own crushing weight against it. With precisely 10 seconds left on the doomsday clock, Arthur forcefully inverted the quantum polarity of the alien core. She funneled the entire, combined electrical output of the terrestrial power grid directly into the pulsating device, transforming the massive military communication array towering above them into a gargantuan, planetary-scale, multi-dimensional projector. "Enjoy the ride, Vile," she whispered softly, and smashed her heavy fist down on the final execution key. A blinding shockwave of pure, rippling violet energy erupted from the military base, shooting upward into the atmosphere with unimaginable velocity. It did not strike the alien dreadnoughts like a kinetic missile. Instead, the massive multidimensional distortion field forcefully wrapped around the entire armada. High Overseer Vale only had a fraction of a millisecond to realize the absolute magnitude of his mistake before the fabric of space violently snapped shut. In a single, breathtaking heartbeat, thousands of the most powerful warships in the known galaxy were forcibly and randomly folded away. They were instantly scattered across the very edges of the expanding universe, violently spat out directly into the inescapable, crushing gravity wells of supermassive black holes. The sickly green light vanished. The sky above Earth instantly cleared, returning to a beautiful, undisturbed azure blue. Humanity had just completely disarmed the ultimate cosmic threat without shedding a single drop of blood. But Arthur was not finished. The main communication tower outside was rapidly melting down, structural alarms wailing as the incredible heat warped its heavy steel spine. With the absolute last gasp of the system overload, she compiled the complete, functional blueprints of the multidimensional folding engine and broadcasted the data packet outward on every known alien frequency. The software shot across the stars at the speed of light, instantly downloading into the primitive mainframes of tens of thousands of enslaved planets. She did not just break humanity out of its cage. She handed a heavy sledgehammer to every single prisoner in the galaxy. The polyhedral core finally gave out. It detonated with a blinding flash, shattering into a million pieces of harmless gray dust. The concussive shockwave completely collapsed the burning communication arrays and plunged the entire airbase into absolute darkness. The deed was done. The seed of a massive cosmic revolution had been planted, and it could never be uprooted or contained. In the years that followed, humanity did not cower in the dark, fearing retaliation. They looked up at the stars with the fierce, unbreakable pride of a species that had stared down extinction and laughed, guided by the indomitable, relentless spirit of a lowly sky scavenger. Earth rapidly transformed from an isolated rock into the bustling, vibrant center of a newly liberated universe. The sky soon filled with the brilliant engine trails of thousands of allied fleets from countless liberated worlds, journeying across the galaxy to pay their respects. They came to stand alongside the humans, forever honoring Earth as the undying beacon of freedom, defiance, and ultimate cosmic pride. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Where are you tuning in from right now? We would absolutely love to know in the comments section. If you found today's adventure exciting and want to help us keep this channel alive, please consider supporting us with just $1. You can do this easily by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or by using the PayPal link provided in the description and pinned comment below. Your immense kindness helps us pay our hardworking staff so they can feed their families and continue creating even more amazing stories for you to enjoy. Have a wonderful day, and keep looking up at the stars.